Slipknot just began their highly anticipated 25th anniversary tour on Tuesday night, and in what I would call a rather ballsy move, played only songs from their debut album for a total set length going just a few minutes above an hour, causing some fans to complain. Let's discuss. The tour began on Tuesday night in Noblesville, Indiana, with special guests Knocked Loose and Orbit Culture. And although the band has been rocking this old school look for a little while now, going back to that intimate pop-up show that they did in Pioneer Town, California a few months ago at Pappy and Harriet's, which is also the first show for new drummer Eloy Casagrande, their set lists from that point up until now have been a fairly standard Slipknot set list with pretty much everything that you would expect, you know, the usual sort of greatest hits set, if you will. Never a band to shy away from throwing a wrench into things and doing the unexpected, though. The kickoff of the anniversary tour saw the band playing their first album in pretty much its entirety, except for the song Diluted, although in a different order, which is interesting because typically when bands do these sort of album anniversary sets for whatever album it is, more often than not, they play the album in its entirety from front to back in the exact order as it appears when you listen to the album. But that's not the case here. Here's the set list from the first show of the tour. The show began with the self-titled album intro, which if you don't know is also the barcode of Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat. Then launching into Sick, which was the first time they played that as the show opener since 2012. And then into Eyeless, Wait and Bleed, Get This, Eeyore, the Sid Wilson remix of Tattered and Torn, Me Inside for the first time since 2015, Liberate, Frail Limb Nursery from Tape, which was removed from the first album alongside Purity for copyright infringement, and then Into Purity, which was eventually released on the 10th anniversary edition of the album, Prosthetics, No Life for the first time since 2000, Only One for the first time since 2012, and then they began the encore with Mudslide on Tape, which was labeled as hidden track intro on the set list, Spit It Out, which is a song they often close with, Surfacing, and finally Scissors for the first time since 2000, which is also Corey Taylor's favorite Slipknot song. And that's it. Essentially just an hour-long show, first album only, no Psychosocial, no Duality, no Unsainted, nothing, just the first album and a blistering 60-minute set, which has caused some fans to complain, saying that the show was too short. Personally, you know, I can kind of see things from both perspectives on this one. And, you know, on one hand, I can kind of see where the frustration is coming. You know, for a headline performance, an hour is super, super short, especially when you take into account that Knocked Loose, the direct support on the tour, they played for 45 minutes, or just about 45 minutes. So, you know, Slipknot only playing about 15 minutes longer than their support band, yeah, it's a little frustrating. And I think if I was at the show, I probably would have been a little bit disappointed too. And not because, you know, there's no other hits, so to speak, but just because that is a super short set for what I'm sure was a fairly expensive concert ticket, because most shows these days are fairly pricey. I remember seeing Motley Crue back on Crewfest 2 in 2009, and what they did on that tour was they played the Dr. Feelgood album in its entirety from front to back. Then they took a break and changed out most of the production, which is kind of surprising to see. And they came back and they did the rest of their hits. And I don't know, I think it would have been cool if Slipknot had done something like that in this scenario, because, you know, maybe do another 30, 40 minutes or so. They definitely have the catalog to do it. And, you know, much like Motley, especially Motley back in the day, both bands are pretty production heavy and theatrical. Although, of course, Slipknot, sounds much better. But, anyways, I think that would have been a very cool thing that Slipknot could have done to make the show a little bit longer and give people what they're paying for, a little bit more bang for your buck. And jumping back to the production for a real quick sidebar here, one thing I do want to point out is that, at least from the footage that I saw, which is a pretty good representation, it's the footage that I've been playing throughout this video, this tour does seem to be a little bit light on the production, which maybe is just another way for the band to throw it back to 1999 and, you know, give you the same sort of feeling that you had if you had saw the band back in the early days. But I don't know, you know, the number one thing that I find myself disappointed with when I go to shows these days, especially these last few years, is a lack of production. And of course, by production, I'm, you know, talking pyro, fireworks, cool stage props, and things like that. I know for plenty of people that's not really a point of concern, but I just feel like, you know, especially these last few years, post-pandemic, production has just went way downhill, and I'm sure that's due in no small part to how crazy expensive things are these days. But, you know, especially when you look at things from back in the day, I mean, remember that toilet that Limp Bizkit had on stage? Or hell, even some of Slipknot's older performances? Things are just so different now than they used to be. And, you know, again, production, not a huge deal for a lot of people. But to me, to see a lack of production, especially with bands like this, where they're, you know, in a way known for it, it is a little bit of a bummer. Anyways, so on one hand, yes, I can see the disappointment of the shorter set length, but on the other hand, there's a few points. For one, for me at least, bloated concerts are a real thing. And by that, I mean, you know, there's been a few shows I've went to over the years where it's like, my God, they could cut this down a little bit. They're really dragging this thing out, blah, blah, blah. And so I do think there is some merit to, you know, leave them wanting more, so to speak. The other thing is that this is Slipknot. This isn't Bruce Springsteen, for example. You know, not to discredit what Bruce does or his band does, you know, but they're known for these crazy 3.5, 4 hour long shows. I think there's probably some shows they've done that go longer than that. But, you know, obviously Slipknot is way more intense, way more aggressive. And let's be real, the OG guys in Slipknot are not getting any younger. Corey Taylor is 50, Clown is 54, Jim Root's 52, and so on. This has got to be tough stuff to do every single night for an entire tour, in a jumpsuit while wearing a mask while in your 50s, and especially with Corey and the vocals on this older stuff, you know, I'd argue are a little bit more intense than they are on some of Slipknot's newer stuff. So yeah, I guess I can really see it from both points of view, but let's not let that take away from the fact that Slipknot has enough balls to go out and do a tour and play nothing but the first album, and knowing that a large portion of the audience, I'd say probably at least 50%, if not more, are probably more so casual fans and probably from that first record only know Wait and Bleed and Spit It Out. So kudos to them for doing that. And if you had the chance to see this while it's out, I absolutely would, because who knows if they're going to do something like this again. Maybe they do an Iowa anniversary tour in a few years and play it in its entirety or most of the album in full. But, you know, why bank on that? If you have a chance to go see this tour, I would absolutely check it out because, again, this is really a one-time only thing. All right, though, I got to run. My fiance is waiting to have me inside, so I got to go. But thanks so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you next time.